Your Honors and opposing counsel, my name is Evie Patella and my co-counsel is Caroline Ward. We represent the people of the great state of Texas. American novelist Ken Casey once said, "The truth doesn't have to do with cruelty, the truth has to do with mercy." This case is about the cruelty of the defendant Warden Walker. The warden endangered and abused the children in her custody at Camp Green Lake. She also assaulted campers and her own staff. Today, the evidence proves, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Warden Walker is guilty of both child endangerment in violation of Section 291922 and felonious assault in violation of Section 2903.11 of the Texas Revised Code. You will hear today that Camp Green Lake was not a good place for boys to be growing up. In fact, it wasn't a camp at all. These kids had to do intense manual labor daily by digging huge holes all day. They did this to find a supposed long-lost treasure. You will hear that they were exposed to blistering heat, lack of water, and poisonous animals. The evidence shows that the digging gave the boys blisters and cuts, and that they would sometimes faint from exhaustion. The defendant was legally responsible for these children, and yet she let them endure this torture. The evidence you will hear today will show you that the warden criminally endangered these children, and that she also assaulted Stanley. Stanley will testify today that he and Mr. Sir were called to the warden's office, where she knowingly caused physical harm to Stanley by scratching his neck with nail polish laced with deadly venom. To further show her cruelty, she attacked Mr. Sir with the venom. Hector Zeroni, another child under the warden's care, and Mr. Pendansky, a former camp counselor, will corroborate this assault. They saw the swollen scars on Mr. Sir's neck and on Stanley's neck. The warden will deny this today, but what reason does Stanley have to lie about this? The defense is going to try to call this child a liar today, but you will hear evidence that the only time Stanley has said the truth was to protect his friends and family. You will hear that after this assault, by the warden, Mr. Sir then cruelly deprived Stanley of water and simply let it pour onto the ground in front of him. Stanley was forced to dig these holes even without water. Even in these conditions, Stanley still retained his kind heart and taught his friend Hector how to read while he tried to soldier on. Hector will bravely stand up today and tell you that he had had enough of the abuse and torture of the camp and that he ran away, but nobody went to look for him. You'll hear that the warden, instead of looking for a lost camper, guarded the water, tried to erase his records, and left him to die in the desert. The only person who went to go and find Hector was Stanley. Stanley and Hector will tell you the story of their survival in the face of danger that the warden put them in. When they were able to return, they were greeted by a hole full of poisonous lizards and a gun pointed at their heads. It was the warden and her goons. Stanley and Hector will tell you that they found a suitcase in that hole with Stanley's name on it, and that the warden attempted to steal it. You will not only hear the stories of the dangerous environment and cruel punishment the warden inflicted on these children from Stanley and Hector, you will also hear it from an adult who was there. Mr. Pendansky, the warden's former employee, will come before you today with the truth about Warden Walker. The law is meant to protect those who are vulnerable, like our youth. The law is meant to protect our children from people like Warden Walker and her cruelty. Cruelty damages a person inside and out. We should try to protect these children and prevent others from being abused by people like Warden Walker. We respectfully request that the court find Warden Walker guilty of child endangerment and felonious assault for the justice of Stanley and Hector, young children who were in a difficult situation and couldn't fight back.
Good morning, Your Honor and opposing counsel. My name is Malcolm D'Souza. I am here with my co-counsel, Conrad Gozon, and we represent the defendant, Warden Walker. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6 states, "Real love is tough love." This case is about tough love offered by the warden in the camp she runs to allow young juveniles a chance to avoid jail and a second chance at a future. Today, you will hear that the juveniles at Camp Green Lake were put in no substantial harm to their health. The facts you will hear today will show that those sent to Camp Green Lake had everything needed for their safety. Any harm to their safety came from their own behavior, their lies, and breaking the rules put in place to keep them safe. No matter the tough love and discipline offered to the young men, some still made the same bad choices that got them in trouble with the law in the first place. You will also hear today that the alleged assault on Mr. Yelnats was all just a big lie, served up today by two known liars, Mr. Yelnats and Mr. Zeroni, as well as one disgruntled former employee, Mr. Pendansky. Today, you will hear the real story. The warden herself, as well as her top guard, Mr. Sir, will tell you about the real Camp Green Lake. Camp Green Lake is designed to build character. You will hear today that how the physical activities and counseling the young men received at camp helped them to think about their bad life choices and safely learn valuable lessons. You will hear today from the warden and even one of the juvenile campers, Rex, that while this camp was not supposed to be comfortable or luxurious, it had everything needed for their safety. Tough, but safe. The warden and Rex will tell you all about the 3 meals a day, the water truck and filling of the canteens, the warnings about the animals, and the relaxing in the rec room after a day of character building through physical activity. Tough, but fair. The warden will tell you how she gave the best care possible with the limited budget from the state. The camp was safe. Any harm to the juveniles came from their own bad choices. Mr. Sir, the warden, and Rex will tell you about these bad choices. Stealing of staff property in the camp water truck, the deals to avoid the required digging, the breaking of rules on reporting the fossils found in the holes, and the dangerous choices to escape from the safety of the camp. It was all these bad choices that led to any risk to their safety. That and all the lies. The many lies of the state's witnesses, Mr. Yelnats, Mr. Zeroni, and Mr. Pendansky, will be exposed today. Mr. Sir and the warden will explain to you the lies they uncovered, including even ones Mr. Yelnats made to his own mother. But the warden will look you in the eye and discuss the most painful lie, the one Mr. Yelnats is trying to tell about some alleged assault by her. Stanley made up a story about the assault. He has been caught lying to his mother and to his camp counselor, so what says he can't lie again? The prosecution has the burden of proof to establish beyond a reasonable doubt cruel punishment for a prolonged time that creates a substantial risk of harm. The evidence you will hear today will show that there was no cruel punishment and no real risk of harm. And as for the assault charge, they cannot meet their burden of proof, as there was only one person who will say that they actually saw the assault, Mr. Yelnats, a known liar. Yes, the warden made the campers do hard work, but she also gave them a better alternative to jail. More importantly, they got a chance to start over. They developed a family. It may be tough love, but the warden cares about the campers. No reliable witness will be able to tell you that the warden endangered the campers and assaulted, and that the assault happened. We respectfully request that the court come to the verdict of not guilty and that the warden be acquitted of the charges. Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Stanley Yelnats.
What do you know about Camp Green Lake, Stanley?
I was an inmate at Camp Green Lake. That's where all these terrible things happened.
Why were you sent to Camp Green Lake?
Because of my no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. And because I was accused of stealing shoes. But I'm innocent, I swear. I didn't steal anything. The shoes just fell from the sky.
What happened after you were accused of stealing shoes?
I was put on trial like a criminal or something. But my mom said if I told the truth, I wouldn't need a lawyer. But boy was she wrong. Telling the truth got me 18 months at Camp Green Lake.
What was it like at Camp Green Lake?
At first it was good that at least I was headed to this camp instead of jail. But Camp Green Lake was nothing like I imagined. There wasn't even a lake, just some dried up desert. The only thing we did all day was dig holes in the hot sun.
Please tell me more about digging holes.
The digging was so hard, crazy long and blazing hot. The adults at camp wouldn't let us stop digging until our holes were perfectly done. I got blisters on my hands that burst and bled, but I still had to keep digging. It was cruel and awful. A kid named Barfbag got bitten by a rattlesnake just on purpose so he could leave.
What was digging like the first day at camp?
I almost passed out. No one at camp seemed to care about us at all, except for Mr. Pendansky, our camp counselor. He told me I wasn't the first who almost passed out. The first day, I almost didn't have the strength to climb out of my hole. I would never want my mom to know what it was really like, how cruel it really was.
So what did you tell your mom about?
I wrote her letters telling her that camp was all fun and games and that the lake was cool and refreshing. But I only lied because I didn't want her to worry. I knew if I told her the truth, things would have gotten way worse. It would have only given my mom more sleepless nights, and it would break her heart.
What was the environment actually like at Camp Green Lake?
Well, the camp was full of deadly, poisonous, yellow-spotted lizards. One bite could kill you in a second. There were signs everywhere that said to beware. But they made us work near them anyway, and the warden's cruelty didn't help the conditions.
Tell me more about the warden.
Well, the heat, desert, lizards may have been scary and dangerous, but the warden was more cruel and worse than all of those things put together. She even attacked Mr. Sir for bothering her about his stupid sunflower seeds. The bad thing was, I was there when it happened.
What happened?
The warden had me bring her a bottle of her special nail polish. She told me the secret ingredient was poisonous rattlesnake venom. I was so crazy scared. I'll never forget what happened next. The warden brushed her nails across my cheeks and even across the open cut I had behind my ear. I mean, she purposely put poisonous venom in my neck.
What did Mr. Sir do?
Well, the warden then walks up to him and brutally claws him across the face. He was writhing around on the ground in pain, this huge tough guy.
Did you tell anyone about these attacks?
I didn't tell anyone, because I knew the whole thing was a warning from the warden, and I was scared she would kill me. I knew this cruel dictator wouldn't hesitate.
What did Mr. Sir do after the attacks?
The next time I was out digging, Mr. Sir didn't fill my canteen. He opened it and let all the water drain onto the ground. Another time, when Mr. Sir filled it, he did it behind the truck, where no one else could see him. I didn't drink it, even though I was so thirsty. I didn't know what it was, but I'm sure it wasn't water.
How would you describe the way the warden ran the camp?
Like a monster. The warden was cruel and heartless. She didn't care about anyone except herself and getting the treasure.
What treasure?
There's a rumor that Kissing Kate Barlow's treasure is buried at Camp Green Lake. I found a golden lipstick tube when I was digging in my hole. The warden must have thought it was a clue to the treasure she had us digging for.
Do you know a Hector Zeroni?
Yeah, Zero's cool. Quiet, but cool. I taught him how to read. We were best friends. I took him under my wing, but then he ran away. I think he couldn't take any more of the cruelty.
What did the adults do after he ran away?
Nothing to help Zero, that's for sure. When he ran away, nobody went after him. They even guarded the water, so when he returned, they could capture him. Warren's orders.
What did you do?
I had to do something. I couldn't stand there to see my friend cruelly forgotten like this, so I decided to go after him. I took the water truck because it was the only way I could go after him. He could die any minute, so I had to go quickly.
What happened next?
I found him under some old boat, but he looked terrible, like half dead. The desert was 95 degrees in the shade. If I hadn't found him, he might have died.
Then what happened?
I got Zero to a place with some water and wild onions, and he started to get better. As we sat there, that's when it all made sense. I thought about the lipstick tube and digging those dang holes. I knew then what the warden was doing.
What was the warden doing?
It was because she wanted to find the treasure. So I asked Zero if he wanted to dig one last hole. We made our way back to camp to dig the hole. That's when all those adults found us. They came at us with a gun. We found something in that hole. It was a suitcase, but we had a big problem.
What was the problem?
Besides the warden's goons pointing guns at us kids, well, we realized we were standing on a poisonous lizard's nest. I thought someone would help us away from the lizards, But instead, the warden made up a story. She was going to tell people that it was an accident and we fell into the hole and the lizards bit us. I mean, covering up 2 kids dying?
How did you survive?
Just then, I heard some cars coming. No one ever came to visit that terrible place. So I knew it was weird, and I was hoping it was some kind of help. And it was. It was my lawyers to the rescue.
What happened?
A woman introduced herself to be my lawyer. No wonder the cruel warden was finally scared out of her mind.
What did this mean to you that your lawyer arrived?
It was a lifesaver. I was so excited because finally I would get freedom and the warden would get the justice she deserves.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Hector Zeroni, but people call me Zero.
Where did you get the name Zero?
At Camp Green Lake, everyone gets some dumb nickname.
How was life at Camp Green Lake?
It was awful. We were faced with dangers left and right, from the sun to poisonous lizards, even the camp staff themselves, plus manual labor every day.
What didn't feel safe about Camp Green Lake?
There was no water, no rain out there in the desert, and not a cloud in the sky to stop the sun. Plus, we have to be out there with dangerous animals like these poisonous lizards.
You said there was manual labor? What do you mean?
We were always doing work for this warden. She makes us get up at 4:30 and march into the hot desert to dig holes all day in the hot sun. We were worked half to death and not given enough water.
How did this make you feel?
I had blisters on my hands and they would burst and tear my hands up. I was always sweating. My mouth was always dry because we were never given enough water and I always felt sick.
You said before that there's a warden and guards. They run the camp?
Yes, Warden Walker, the cruel dictator of that prison.
Would you describe the warden?
I was terrified of her. She's cruel and forces us to search for treasure in those holes. She even made fun of me for not being able to read and write.
What treasure?
The legend is that Kissin' Kate Barlow left some treasure behind in Green Lake.
Did anybody ever find any of this treasure?
Stanley did find a gold lipstick tube with the initials KB on it while digging. The warden was all excited about it. Like I said, this digging was all for her.
Were you close to Stanley?
Yes, he's my best friend. In fact, he's the only friend I ever had. He even taught me to read and write.
What happened to Stanley?
So much. While digging holes, this other kid Magnet stole Mr. Sir's precious sunflower seeds. The bag ended up with Stanley and he accidentally spilled it in his hole.
What happened after that?
Mr. Sir comes up, sees the empty bag. Stanley took the blame and didn't rat out Magnet. But Sir took Stanley to the warden's cabin, which is kind of like the ultimate punishment.
What happened in the warden's cabin?
I wasn't there, but I'll tell you what I did see. Stanley came back and had this mark behind his ear that cut from Zigzag's shovel, but way more puffy. Mr. Sir had these red swollen marks on his face too.
What happened after that?
Mr. P handed me a shovel and I swung it in the air. I never wanted to see another shovel again. I guess I must have accidentally hit Mr. P. I really didn't mean to.
What happened next?
I just ran away. I'd rather die in the desert than be near the warden in the camp another second.
Did any of the adults working at the camp come and find you in the desert?
Seems like I was just left for dead out there. I spent days in agony under this old boat. Thankfully, Stanley came to help me.
It was Stanley who found you.
Yeah, it was. Not the adults who were paid to keep me safe. Stanley saved my life.
What did you do next?
We went back to camp at night and went to the hole where Stanley found the gold tube. We started digging, and Stanley found this old suitcase, but lizards as well.
Did any of the adults at camp help you?
Not only did they not help us, they just stood there talking. The warden was just so focused on that suitcase, not about saving 2 children from poisonous animals.
How did you survive that ordeal?
Stanley's lawyers showed up and saved us. I got the suitcase away from the warden and gave it to the lawyers and showed them that the big black letters on the case spelled Stanley's name.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Mr. Sir.
What is your occupation, Mr. Sir?
I've been a guard for 20 years, the last 10 at Camp Green Lake.
What are your duties as a guard?
My job is to watch over the young men at camp and make sure they stay in line and follow the rules.
What do the campers do at Camp Green Lake?
Well, they dig holes every day to build character. We got them up early to avoid the worst heat. Pendanski and I brought them water with the water truck.
What was the camp like?
They had everything they needed: food, clothes, time to shower. After they were done digging, they had free time. That's a good incentive to hard work. Get out of the sun, enjoy the rest of the day. It was tough, yes, but it built character.
What do you mean when you say build character?
They were here because they broke the law, period. We ain't a bunch of babysitters, and this ain't no beach resort. We put their energy to good use and teach them good lessons like hard work.
But why digging holes?
Physical work is good. A working brain is a thinking brain. The hole is a kind of metaphor for the direction of life. Hard work to a better future.
How do you feel about your job at Camp Green Lake?
Well, it's the best job I've ever had. I'm very proud of my work because I get to see these young people to a better future. And I'm good at it. See, I understand the juvenile mind.
Were there ever any times when the juveniles caused trouble at Camp Green Lake?
For the most part, the campers were no trouble at all. But yes, there were some issues, especially with that Yelnats kid.
What did Stanley Yonats do to cause trouble at the camp?
Yelnats was reckless and didn't take camp seriously. One day, he stole my sunflower seeds, and I caught him. I'm not sure if he ate all of them, but there was a lot of seeds. But he took the blame so he could get favors from other campers. That's prison life for you.
Why do you remember this incident so well?
Well, one of the highlights of my day was eating my sunflower seeds, because after my work in the hot sun, watching the boys, it was refreshing to sit back and relax, looking out over the horizon, eating my seeds.
Did Stanley cause any other trouble at Camp Green Lake?
Yes, indeedy. There was this one time when Yelnats literally stole the whole water truck and drove it straight into a hole. Instead of facing the music, he ran off with that other bad apple, Zeroni.
What can you tell us about the relationship between Stanley and Zero?
Those two were thick as thieves, partners in crime. They made some deal where Zeroni dug Yelnats' hole in return for reading lessons, getting his hard work done for him, not learning his lesson. Again, prison culture. It's a deceitful mindset.
Describe Mr. Yonats from your observations at Camp Green Lake.
Well, I saw him stealing those seeds and the truck. He's a liar, too, and he doesn't follow the rules. One time, he found an artifact while digging, but gave it to some other boy when he should have given it to the staff. He thinks he can just make up his own rules, I guess.
Why do you think that Stanley Yonats is a liar?
I read it with my own two eyes. He lied straight through his teeth to his mom in letters that he wrote about Camp Green Lake, talking about swimming in some lake that doesn't even exist.
Was life at Camp Green Lake dangerous, Mr. Sir?
There was a bit of danger, sure, but nothing the campers couldn't handle. There were some little lizards, but we warned them by putting up signs. Plus, I had a gun if they needed protection.
You say you were armed?
Sure, I was a guard. I told the campers to stay away from those lizards and snakes. They were like bees. You don't bother them, they don't bother you. I'd take care of them. The gun wasn't for these campers anyway. Wouldn't want to waste a bullet on them.
Mr. Sir, in your view, is Camp Green Lake a success of a place for tough love and improving the character of young men?
Sure, my job was to keep the campers safe, alive, and following the rules. Yeah, we gave them tough love and demanded they follow the rules, but bottom line is we never hurt any of them. We truly cared for those kids and wanted the best for them always.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Please state your name for the record.
Rex, but everyone calls me X-Ray.
Why are you called X-Ray?
Oh, Pig Latin, and because my glasses are really thick.
Do you know about Camp Green Lake?
Yeah, I was a camper there.
What was Camp Green Lake like?
Some old buildings, tents, and after our work was done, we got to go to the rec room.
What do you mean, get your work done?
Well, we were there to learn a lesson, so we had to dig holes.
What were the conditions like for the campers?
They were tough, but the rec room it had a pool table and it had a couch, and so yeah.
What else can you tell us about a day in the life at Camp Green Lake?
We woke up before the hottest sun, and then they'd fill our canteens. We'd dig our holes, and then they gave us food, and then we got to go shower before dinner and sit in the rec room.
You said you would do it all over again the next day. Why?
Well, that's what we did every day. We'd get up and dig holes. It was just like a routine.
Who was the warden?
She wasn't really around much, but she gave us the basic needs we needed, and she told the guards what to do.
Who are the guards?
Mainly Mr. Sir and Mr. Pendansky.
Describe Mr. Pendansky.
Well, we called him Mom because he always acted like a mom, and he was our leader of Group D.
Do you know a camper named Stanley Yelnats?
Oh, you mean Caveman? Yeah, digging holes with him was always an adventure.
What do you mean?
Well, one day he found a gold tube, and then I convinced him to give me the gold tube because I had been there longer than him, and I obviously deserved it. And once you got a gold tube, or if you found anything, you'd give it to the warden, and then you'd get you'd get a spa and all that stuff, and a shower, and you get to finish digging your hole.
Why didn't Stanley deserve it?
Because he wasn't even digging his own hole. He was making Zero dig his hole. It wasn't fair.
What did you think about this?
It wasn't fair at all. But then he got in a fight with Zigzag, and then Zero started choking him, and then Mom, she shot off a gun, and then Zero ran off. And then Zero hit him with a shovel.
What did the warden do?
Well, she came out and she asked us what was going on, and then Zero was gone.
What happened next?
Well, Zero, he threw the shovel at Mom, and then he swoosh, and then he ran off into the desert, and Stanley went after him in a truck a few days later.
X-Ray, as a resident of Camp Green Lake, tell us any other thoughts you have about the camp.
Yeah, it was hot and boring, but we were there for a punishment. It wasn't supposed to be fun.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please state your name for the record.
My name's Louise Walker.
What is your occupation, Miss Walker?
I own and operate a camp called Camp Green Lake. It's a juvenile detention center, so I guess you could say I'm the warden.
Where is Camp Green Lake located?
Well, it's in Texas, but honestly, it's not really a lake anymore. That part's all dried up. But I do still live there, alone in a small cabin just a short ways from camp.
What do you do as warden of Camp Green Lake?
Well, my job isn't glamorous, honestly. It's just mostly paperwork and budgets. I don't really run the day-to-day stuff. I do leave that to the staff. So yeah, being the warden is my job, but honestly, it's more like a family, or at least the only family I got.
Describe the camp.
Basically, it's a better alternative to jail for these young people. It's a place that helps build character through hard work. These young men need tough love, and that's exactly what they get.
What is the budget for the camp?
Honestly, it's barely anything in my opinion. I use my own land to the camp for free, and the money we get is barely enough for food and water, but I do stretch it the best I can to provide the best care I can. I mean, bologna sandwiches don't grow on trees.
How does one end up at Camp Green Lake?
Well, remember, these are young lawbreakers, and they're sentenced here by a judge because they are criminals and have broken the law.
What is life like for the campers at Camp Green Lake?
Like I said, they're here to serve a punishment, and we give them tough love. We get them plenty of food and water and shelter, and we even get the campers up at the hottest part before the hottest part of the day, and that's when they do their reflection digging.
What is reflection digging?
Well, they dig holes in my property, but there is a philosophy here. They're here to build discipline and character through hard work, but not by babying them. This is tough love for my camp family.
What are they digging for?
Well, you see, I grew up on this land. It used to be a lake in an old city. So that means there's a lot of artifacts and fossils, and I do love me some artifacts. I used to dig myself with my old grandpas.
Who are some of the lawbreakers at this camp?
Well, two of them are the reason we're here today. Stanley and Hector are two of the worst boys the camp has ever had.
What have these boys done since they came to Camp Green Lake?
They just continued their criminal ways, lying and stealing. One time, Stanley stole food from a guard, and when confronted with the consequences, he just made up a ridiculous story trying to make me into the bad guy.
What else did he do?
Another time, Stanley found an artifact while he was doing his reflection digging and broke a clear camp rule when he gave it to another camper instead of to a camp staff. That doesn't even include the terrible things he did with Zero.
What did Stanley and Zero do together, Warden?
Well, you see, Zero was fighting with another camper and then hit Mr. Pendansky on with a shovel and knocked him out. Can you believe it? So instead of facing the consequences and getting tough love, Zero decided to run away. Later, Stanley ran away too by stealing and wrecking the water truck.
What happened next?
We watched for them to make sure they returned. We posted guards out where the boys might return, and they did, but I was not surprised that we found them in the dead of night in a hole, digging for artifacts just to keep for themselves.
What is your opinion on how the Camp Green Lake experience went for Stanley and Zero?
I do have to admit, I failed them, despite how hard I tried. They're just pure criminals, troublemakers. They lie, steal, and do whatever they can to get out of trouble that they caused in the first place. Tough love, unfortunately, does not work for everyone.
You testified earlier that Stanley stole food and stole the water truck, but you said that he lied as well?
Yes, I know many of his lies. He lied about the tale of poisonous nail polish, which is not true at all. Worst of all, though, he lied to his mother in letters that he wrote about the camp.
What did he say in these letters to his mother?
He lied saying there was a big lake at the camp and that he always swam in it. He also made up some ridiculous stories about rock climbing and jet skiing.
You have been accused of assaulting Stanley. What do you say in response?
I'm just so hurt by this. I mean, I do admit I'm not perfect, but I would never hurt a soul. That claim of assault is completely made up by Stanley.
Was Camp Green Lake a success as a place for building character for these young men?
Yes, I do believe so. Most young men come here, do their reflection digging, and learn discipline and leave as better people. I did everything I could for Stanley and Zero, but they were just too resistant to my help.
Warden, did you endanger the safety of Stanley and Zero or any other camper?
Oh goodness, no. These claims are just to cover up their lies to the camp staff, stealing food and a truck and breaking rules. If anything, I'm just guilty of protecting them from their bad choices and giving them a second chance.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
My name is Caroline Ward, and on behalf of my co-counsel Evie Patella, we thank you for your attention and consideration today. Today you heard how cruel an adult in authority can be to our vulnerable children. Warden Walker has been charged with felonious assault under Texas Revised Code Section 2903.11 and child endangerment under Section 2919.22. Under the law of this great state of Texas, the warden is guilty of child endangerment if she punished or disciplined the children in her custody in a way that caused a substantial risk of serious harm. The witnesses told you today what the warden forced these young boys to do, including digging holes in the sweltering heat. She had legal custody and responsibility for these children, as she herself admits and Mr. Pendanski corroborates. She is the boss at Camp Green Lake, and it is her land. On this land, she created a very substantial risk to the safety of these children from not only the poisonous wildlife, sweltering heat, and lack of water, but from the staff and from herself. The state has met its burden proving the warden's child endangerment. You heard from both Stanley and Zero that Mr. Sir has pointed a gun at the children, and from the warden herself that she shoved a child into a hole with a pitchfork. At the warden's direction, these children woke up before dawn to go out and dig holes as large as their shovels every day with barely enough water. Campers passed out in their holes as they dug, and their hands would burst with blood from their digging. One camper, Hector Zeroni, told us how he would get blisters on his hands, and how he felt sick from the sheer heat and the horrible pain he was going through. What was all of this for? The warden's own greed. Abuse of innocent children for a rumored treasure hidden on her property. All of this suffering for a legend. The warden and those who testified for her today, perhaps out of fear, denied this with the excuse that the harmful punishment build character, but her true motive was always for treasure. The warden not only endangered these children, but she assaulted Stanley Elnuts as well. Under Texas law, the warden is guilty of felonious assault if she knowingly caused harm or attempted to cause harm with means of a deadly weapon. Stanley testified that the warden knowingly and viciously attacked Mr. Sir across the face and knowingly poked an open wound on Stanley's neck with nail polish made with deadly rattlesnake venom. This venomous polish caused the wounds to swell and hurt and could have been life-threatening. Hector and Mr. Pendanski testified that they saw both Mr. Sir's and Stanley's horrible wounds and corroborated Stanley's account of the aftermath of the assault. The warden's defense? Character building. And all of our prosecution witnesses, they're liars. That's all you heard from her defense today. I ask you to take a real look at her character, and there you will find nothing but cruelty and greed from this warden. I ask the manual labor, the lack of water, the heat, the guns, the poisonous lizards, the venom. Look at the corroboration between the testimonies of Stanley, Hector, and Mr. Pendanski, and the admissions of the warden herself. This is the true story of Camp Green Lake. Tale of lies, greed, deceit, and cruelty. The downfall of the warden was her own fault, through her exploitation of these poor children. The warden assaulted Stanley with a deadly weapon. The warden cruelly abused and endangered all of the campers under her care. The prosecution seeks justice for these children and respectfully requests that this court find Warden Walker guilty of child endangerment under Section 2919.22 of the Texas Revised Code and of felonious assault under Section 2903.11. Thank you, Your Honor.
My name is Conrad Gozon, and on behalf of my co-counsel, Malcolm D'Souza, we thank you for your attention and consideration. Today, you heard all about tough love, young men who had committed crimes given a second chance. My client, Warden Walker, has been charged with endangering children and felonious assault. The state failed its burden to prove these two significant charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Warden Walker only wanted to show tough love to these minors. These children were her family. The state of Texas sentenced these young men guilty of crimes to this punishment. The warden only wished to give them a second chance and to learn from their mistakes. My client has been falsely accused of endangering these campers, but as the warden testified to, the day-to-day lives and care of these children were entrusted to Mr. Pendanski and Mr. Sir. To meet its burden, the state needed to prove that the warden herself created a substantial risk of harm to these children and gave them cruel and excessive punishment. The evidence shown here today completely failed to show these elements. You heard from the warden that the camp put up multiple warning signs to protect them from those little lizards. Mr. Sir stated that the camp counselors were armed in case of any life-threatening emergency. X-Ray, himself a camper, told you today that the campers were given 3 meals a day, a shower, a tent to sleep in, and even a recreation room. Any danger or risk that came to these young men was from their own bad choices. For instance, when Stanley and Zero ran away from the safety of the camp into the desert, against the rules and putting their own lives at risk. The reality is that the prosecution witnesses you heard from today have been shown to be liars. Stanley even admitted that he lied to his own mother. He also lied about stealing Mr. Sir's sunflower seeds, as well as finding the gold lipstick tube. Another witness, Zero, through his words and actions, showed us he would do anything to help Stanley. He taught by Stanley to read, and in return, dug Stanley's holes, which again was not allowed at camp. Lastly, Mr. Pendanski was too soft on the boys. He was upset about getting fired, so he would do anything to get revenge against the warden. The prosecution bears the burden today of showing beyond a reasonable doubt the elements of child endangerment. That the warden created a substantial risk of harm to the safety of the campers through excessive punishment. Instead, what you heard today were lies and bias of those with a history of untruthfulness trying to bring the warden down. Instead, you heard about the warden's genuine attempt to give these young men a second chance to learn from their past mistakes through hard work and tough love. The prosecution also bears the burden of showing elements of felonious assault under Texas law. But this alleged assault was a false accusation made up by Stanley. Stanley himself testified that he lied to his mother and one of the camp counselors. He is a known liar and the only person who says that the assault was real. Both Mr. Sir and the warden agree that Stanley, a known liar, has made this up. You heard no testimony today from any other witnesses that they saw an assault with a deadly weapon on Stanley. There was no assault, and it never happened. Your Honor, the evidence today was clearly shown that my client is not guilty of child endangerment or felonious assault. Those testifying against the warden today did not want her second chance or tough love or to learn from their past crimes. They just wanted to continue their lying ways. We respectfully request that you come to the verdict of not guilty for both charges. Thank you.